I mean, the space has just come so far in the past 4 or 5 years. It's
Mhm.
incredible to see so many new virtual influencers popping up every day. And, they're taking so many different forms. They're no longer kind of like human forms. You're seeing like anime and kind of manga figures. You're seeing like really abstract, kind of characters, all with really high followings and really, really high engagement.
Hi, I'm Mike D'Annunzio, the founder of Pebble Ventures, and welcome to Metaverse Matters. Really happy today to have with me Cameron James Wilson, the founder of the Digitals, and my colleague Lauren Fenema. This episode was really enlightening for me. We covered a lot of ground on digital avatars and influencers, how consumers think about them, the rising prominence of identity. And if you're a brand and you're thinking about creating your own avatar or working with a virtual influencer, Cameron has a lot of great insights from the last several years that he's been working in this space. And if you're listening to this on audio, we provide a lot of imagery of the work that Cameron's created. So if you want to see that, head over to pebbleventures.com/metaverse and you can watch the video version there. So great episode today. Looking forward to sharing it with all of you. And let's get going. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Metaverse Matters. We're really happy to have with us today Cameron James Wilson, who's the founder of the Digitals. And we're going to be talking about something that's coming up quite a bit right now. It's avatars and identity. And Cameron has been doing this for quite some time, and he'll be able to share a lot of his experiences today in order to help brands begin to think about it. So maybe Cameron, for our listeners who don't know the work that you've done, maybe if you could just introduce the concept of digitals and the concept of digital models.
So when I created the Digitals, I had this vision of creating the world's first all digital modeling agency,
Mm,
meaning that we represented only digital models, which was something really, really exciting for me at the time. I kind of just thought it was straight off the pages of a sci-fi novel or out of kind of Blade Runner or something like that. And I'd never
yeah.
really seen anything like that done before. So I thought, let's do it. And it kind of started as I wouldn't say it wasn't as serious when I started. I kind of just did it for fun.
Mm,
And then it got picked up everywhere. It kind of caused a lot of disruption, and people were like, where is fashion going? And asking a lot of questions. And we started working with some really incredible clients, kind of helping them understand and navigate this new kind of space,
mm,
that was just forming at the time. So this was 4 or 5 years ago now, before kind of NFTs and Web 3.0 really caught
sure.
on. People were kind of just learning about virtual influencers, these digital characters, emerging on social media platforms. So helping our clients navigate that space. And we started working with some incredible brands. One of the first was Balmain, the French fashion house. And, from then on, we really had to take this super serious.
Mm,
This was actually something in its forming stages.
interesting. And then tell us about Shudo. So Shudo was one of the first. Is that correct that you created? It'd just be really interesting to kind of hear the backstory on that.
So Shudu was the first character that I created.
Yeah.
And this was before the Digitals, before everything. I created Shudu,
Mm,
and I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I just knew that I didn't want to be a fashion photographer anymore. I felt kind of limited creatively. If you
mm,
want to do a fashion shoot, you have to invest a lot of time, a lot of money into having a studio, into booking models, makeup artists, lots and lots of things. And I kind of felt creatively stunted by that. Sometimes my most creative times are at 2 in the morning.
Totally.
And it's not going to be possible to find a model at 2 in the morning, so so for me, I wanted to find a medium that I could create anything I wanted, anytime I wanted, and
mm,
3D was that medium. And I just kind of took to it really, really quickly. I thought I'd have to go to university. I thought I'd have to pay thousands of pounds for certain programs and things like that. But I just downloaded a program called Daz 3D, which is kind of a character creation, kind of 3D program for kind of concept and digital art. And I just took to it really quickly. I think all of my skills in photography just crossed over, and I created this character called Shudu. I just wanted to create this really, really gorgeous image of this woman with these gold necklaces on. And I posted it online, and straight away she went viral. Posted of her. It was shared around the world. It was shared by Naomi Campbell. It was shared by Fenty Beauty. It was crazy. It got hundreds of thousands of likes. And I kind of just, it was the validation that I wish I had as a fashion photographer. And yet it came so easily as a 3D artist. I'd only been doing it for 3 months. And straight away,
Wow.
I was getting this crazy amount of kind of eyes on me, kind of people looking at my work.
Sure.
I think I was one of those initial people that liked it. I totally remember it making the rounds. And I also remember stopping in my tracks trying to figure out, is she real? I remember like at first glance, just scrolling through, I had this moment of being like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. And I wanted to know more about it. And actually with that, I remember in some of your initial interviews, it sounded like it was also that Shudu was very much a piece of art, and that she was such an incredible, first step into something that was clearly really new. And how have you seen it evolve? Obviously, it's no longer just artwork, and Shudu is a model and an influencer, and kind of gained so much traction. And like you mentioned, offers a great platform to partner with brands. How has that evolved? And what do you think about in these conversations with brands when it comes to working with someone like Shudu?
I mean, the space has just come so far in the past 4 or 5 years. It's incredible to see so many new virtual influencers popping up every day. And, they're taking so many different forms. They're no longer kind of like human forms. You're seeing like anime and kind of manga figures. You're seeing like really abstract, kind of characters, all with really high followings and really, really high engagement. And I think people have just become more and more accepting of it over the past few years. It's really evolved to be something quite serious. I think in the beginning it was almost a gimmick, but now with the metaverse, I think people are really looking at these influencers as the future, as the future of the space and the future leaders in the space. The future influencers of the metaverse. That is really, really interesting. And I think that those brands that engaged in this space really early, at first maybe people were thinking, oh, what are they doing, using these digital models? But now you look back and you think, wow, they were so progressive and so ahead of the times, and I think you can still be progressive. I don't think time has run out yet. If you're a brand and you're looking to kind of engage in the space, it's still early days. You can still get in there early and you can still make an impact on this space. I see projects popping up all the time, even outside of avatars, different NFT projects and things like that are really changing the way we look at this space. So I think it's evolved, it's matured, but I still think there's space for brands to really, really make their mark and still be at the forefront of this huge wave.
Interesting. Could you tell us a little bit about what you've learned over the years about how consumers interact with digital avatars, or how consumers, I'd love to hear your views on how consumers are thinking of identity and even their own avatars going forward. But like how have they reacted to engaging with something that's digital only?
I think the pandemic has really shaped the way that people view influencers. I think you have kind of like pre-pandemic where you had these influencers popping up, and it was really, really kind of early days, and some were kind of really intrigued by the characters. They were there for the story. They wanted to hear more about the narrative. Some followed characters like Shudu because they just loved the way that she looked. They loved the art that I create with her, so they kind of just wanted something visual. And people were just kind of unsure about the whole space and how to interact with it. But over the course of the pandemic, people have realized that these avatars really are a way to kind of express yourself digitally. You know, and when you're kind of stuck inside, I think a lot of people were actually thinking about, you know, gaming and avatars, and their digital identity became so much more important because we weren't able to interact physically. So people really switched and kind of took this much more seriously. And now you have people using NFTs as their profile pictures, you know, verified on Twitter and things like that. They're actually really spending a lot of money and investing a lot of money in their digital identity. And that is obviously going to take the form of fully 3D avatars once, you know, once more of the metaverse kind of develops and kicks off, you know, and people are going to be investing a lot of money and time in that. And it'll be really, really interesting to see how people express identity in this space, you know, because when you can be anyone, you know, what kind of form does that take? And I'm really kind of excited to see how it's going to develop.
Yeah, I've been thinking so much about the consumer mindset and how digital modeling shows up and how you might interact with these new avatars. And, you know, do you think, or do you commonly see that digital modeling is very much a part of digital fashion? Or do you feel that, you know, we work with a lot of brands who make a physical product, so they're super curious about how to experiment in these new industries, whether it's with a digital model or creating digital fashion. So are they related? And what have you learned so far about how brands, you know, think about it too?
The way that I approach Shudu really is like the face of 3D fashion and digital fashion, and it's something that I'm really, really passionate about. Is that I learned when I started this journey was that a lot of brands are actually switching to 3D design. So they're moving away from kind of physically sketching garments, and they're moving away from physically stitching garments together, and actually into kind of designing these garments digitally, and previewing them and kind of creating these lookbooks digitally. And I found that fascinating, you know, and I thought the impact of that on waste and kind of productivity, I thought was really, really, really interesting. So when I think of Shudu, you know, I really, really think that she is kind of almost the face of that. But when I think of avatars in general, I think, you know, I think they have so many different facets to them. You know, they might not, you know, it might not be about fashion for one. It might actually be a political stance, or, you know, tackling something in society or something like that. You know, they might not have any interest in fashion. And I think you can also use virtual influencers to illustrate a point about technology. So it doesn't necessarily have to be about digital goods, but it can be just a comment on kind of what's happening. So even if you do produce something physically, you can use the virtual influencers to just kind of you know, illustrate about the future, where the future's going. You know, we've done several collaborations with car companies, and
Very
they've kind of
cool.
used, yeah, really cool and
Yeah.
really unexpected for us.
Yeah.
But they used virtual influence to kind of illustrate a point about the future rather than necessarily selling a digital product. It was more kind of like just showing where the future's going, and for one of them, almost showcasing that their car had electric capabilities and things like that. So really just using it as a narrative tool rather than to sell digital product.
Yeah. Oh, I did see that. Weren't they in a showroom, right? I feel like I saw it. Yeah, it was very cool. Yeah, that campaign.
Danny.
Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, so cool. And you know, when these brands, I think we're focused on that because that's clearly our audience. And you mentioned how they might be able to represent their brand through these avatars and make a nod to the future. Do you think there are brands that are excited to invest in creating their own avatar as the face of their brand? Have you been working with any, you know, I know you may not be able to name them, but do people frequently come to you wanting to create their very own avatar to live on, you know, through a social channel, and then maybe later enter any one of these different virtual worlds? Is that a trend you see happening, or is it more that they might just collaborate with Shudu to create something special around a campaign?
I think I definitely know that this year
Yeah.
is going to be a big year for brands creating their own kind of digital personas and identities for a multitude of reasons. You know, whether
Mm,
that's just kind of being a brand ambassador, or maybe it's about being an ambassador or a face for a certain group. I know that this is something that's going to happen. I think people will still continue to work with influencers like Shudu, who have their own following, and you know, people are all interested in what Shudu's doing.
mm,
But I think for brands, it's exciting to kind of create your own character and put a face to kind of your consumer. It can be a bit of a struggle for a lot of brands to kind of imagine what the face of their consumer might look like. You know, how do you just pick one person
mhm.
Hmm.
um, to kind of be that face? And I think that that's part of the challenge, and something that I find really, really interesting and exciting when working with these brands. It's like, who is that character going to be, you know, and how can I help them develop that character? Because the temptation can be to create something that is completely unoffensive, completely, you know, kind of like trying to cater to every one of your consumers, and all you end up with is just something that's really, really bland, you know. So
Yeah.
having that expertise and having someone there who can kind of help you create a character that's distinctive and stands out and has a story of their own and a voice of their own, I think is the value in this space.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about your process, kind of how you work, how you've worked in the past with brands, and just what does the process look like? So if I'm a brand, I say, you know what, we're really looking at creating an avatar for ourselves, not to partner with the Shudu, for example. You know, we have brand personas, we have marketing strategies, we have, you know, kind of campaigns that we're running, but we want to do this. So how does that work? Maybe just see if you can give us a little insight into how you've typically worked with brands and how brands should be thinking about this from a just a process standpoint.
So the first thing is to look at this from a really, really long-term perspective. You know, this is an
Okay.
investment. You know, this isn't just a flash in the pan. Oh, we're going to create this character, and then in 6 months' time, you know, it's over and done with. You know, this
Mm,
is something that really brands should be looking at developing over a number of years, introducing multiple characters, multiple diverse characters as well, and building a narrative and a kind of a family. You know, this is something that's it's really, really important, and needs to be constructed in the right way. So the initial character might just be kind of like a jump off point, you know, and then you might introduce multiple characters after that. And I think it's
mm,
important that each of those characters has something to say, you know, has kind of a point of view. And which character is right for what brand is all really down to kind of looking at their demographic and kind of who their consumer is, and trying to put a face to that, while still kind of keeping it distinctive and still, you know, keeping it kind of like on point with the branding and kind of their messaging. um so yeah, it can be quite a process. It can be quite a process. It takes me about 4 to 6 weeks to create an avatar. Generally, I like to work directly with the brand and kind of getting resources from them. What kind of faces do they like? You know, showing me lots of references and things like that. And just kind of, yeah, just kind of being creative with it. And I love that. And kind of working with them um, to develop this persona. It's really, really, really exciting.
mm. That's great.
Super exciting. And I love your point about how these models are also potentially the virtual influencers of the metaverse. And so we think about the future in that way too. Like you mentioned, the long-term vision. You know, today it might feel like a lot of it is kind of static imagery, which is amazing and beautiful. And to your point, really says something on its own. Do you see a future where this evolves into either the virtual model going into the metaverse and help it leading their customers there, or helping them understand this new space and community that's developing, as well as does video or any of those other mediums come into play in the next few years, in your opinion?
I absolutely think that. And I think we need to kind of look at this almost like a game. And in any game that you play, you'll have what's called NPCs, which are non-playable characters. And the job of those NPCs are to push the story forward, and also to help guide you through that game, help guide you through that world. And if we look at virtual influencers in a similar way, that's kind of going to be their purpose. It's these kinds of story and kind of narrative kind of characters that kind of guide you through the metaverse, help you through it. Some of them might be celebrities that you might never really interact with, face to face. You might go to their concert or something, but some of them will be much more accessible, and will be helping you and talking and chatting with you and keeping you company. And I find that really, really super exciting. The future of these characters. And when I look at Shudu, I think, I wonder what her future is like, because she's going to outlive me by decades, centuries, maybe, and that's what you have to think about with these characters, is you're not just creating a character for like the next couple of years. These are like the next Mickey Mouse, or like Winnie the Pooh, or these are the new characters of this age that in a century's time will still be around long after I'm gone or other creators are gone. So how are these characters going to live on? What are their lives going to be like? What are the capabilities of these characters going to be like? It's just so super exciting when you think of it like that.
Yeah, that shifted my mind in a big way. So yeah,
For
cool
sure.
to think about.
What else are you excited about from a technological standpoint? New creative tools, other technologies that you're experimenting with. Anything you can share with us on that front?
So I'm currently really, really obsessed with what's called VTubers. And these are virtual characters that stream or have YouTube channels. And they often have massive and major following. They usually take the form of kind of anime or manga characters. Like they look very hand-drawn in their kind of appearance, and they have kind of limited mobility, but it doesn't stop them from having this huge impact on their audience and a huge following and people loving them. And I find that super interesting, that people, you don't need to be hyper realistic, you don't need to have these like superhuman characters that can actually end up being a little bit creepy. That people are really excited to engage with these kind of more anime manga looking characters, and they love that, and I love it. So I'm really, really kind of obsessed at looking at kind of the programs that they're using to create these characters, the kind of way that they're rigged, how they make them look so like a piece of art, but at the same time it's technology, and it's the way that those two kind of spaces come together, and also the compelling stories that the creators of them have. One of them that I follow, called Iron Mouse, her real story in the real world is just super interesting, and you kind of really, really connect with her, despite the fact that all you see is this kind of cartoon image. And I just find that really interesting. I think the metaverse is going to be populated with tons of different kinds of characters. You're going to want people are going to want to live in worlds that maybe don't look like this one, aren't hyper realistic. They're going to want to live in kind of manga novels or anime or cartoon worlds. So I find that aspect really, really, really interesting, because I think everyone thinks, oh, we're pushing towards where you can't tell what's real and what's not, and I think, well, actually it might go the other way. People might push more towards something that's more of an aesthetic, something that's more artistic.
I totally see that with my daughter. I have a young daughter, and she's completely into that stuff, and that resonates so well with me, where it's not realistic really at all, but it is the story, it is the connection. There's kind of an emotional bond there that is fascinating, and it will have tremendous impacts as that generation grows up and becomes the consumers of tomorrow, for sure. I'd be curious if there's anything from a technological standpoint, limitations you found, or things that kind of frustrate you that aren't quite there, especially as you're looking at, some of the hyper realistic work that you do. Is there anything brands should just be aware of that, we're not quite there technically?
I think animation is always difficult. If
Yeah.
you're animating hyper realistic characters, it's always difficult, especially the more realistic the character gets, the harder they are to animate, and that's the struggle that I have with my characters with Shudu, is that I don't come from an animation background. I
Right.
come from a photography background. So what I kind of know and understand are stills. And when it comes to animating these characters, the budgets need to be quite big. This is animation that competes with Hollywood. If you
Right.
look at kind of some of the best animation in Hollywood or of human faces, it's still not really quite there. I went to see I think it's like Genesis Man or something with Will Smith, and that had like a ton of amazing technology put into it to kind of make his younger self, and in some of the scenes it's like, wow, this is incredible. But in others, it's still like, okay, like you can tell, it's still not quite there, and that is the best of the best working on that.
Right.
So I think brands need to temper their expectations a little bit when it comes to animation, and maybe be a bit more forgiving. Sometimes animation isn't going to look that great or that realistic when you animate these characters, and I think that's okay, because the consumer can see that these are 3D characters, and I actually think that's a good thing, for them to be able to differentiate. So maybe not making it so hyper realistic. One of the other things that I really, really struggle with as well, and is still to this day a pain point for us, is finding hairstyles that are culturally appropriate for our characters. So for Shudu, we don't actually make the hair in-house. We can make some hairstyles in-house, but obviously you want to have access to lots of different hairstyles.
Sure.
And they just aren't there. There's only 2 braided hairstyles that I can find that are really, I would say, good enough for Shudu. And that is crazy, considering the huge amount of hairstyles available for our character Danny, who's Caucasian. How many different hairstyles she can have. And I really, really want to see more diversity when it comes to being able to dress up your characters, being able to change their hair, their kind of skin tone, things like that. I think it's crazy that we have these limitations, and I think for people going forward, it's so important that they feel represented in the metaverse and in this space. Sure. I can't actually imagine what it must be like to log into a game and not be able to make a character that looks like you. I think that it must be hugely frustrating for certain people. I mean, the only thing I can relate slightly to that is I mean, not many characters have my body type, when I'm playing a game. So but I don't think that compares to something that really is something so so definitive of your identity, and not being able to represent yourself properly in these 3D spaces. And I really hope that companies are thinking about that and taking that seriously and challenging it.
Yeah, good point.
I love that. I think and especially with what seems to be such a wide open creative blank space in the metaverse, to just immediately confront these same issues is like, let's get there and get there faster. So that's a really good point. I think, we've learned a lot today. So thanks for sharing so much, Mike. I didn't know if there was anything else you were curious to learn over the next couple
No,
minutes.
not really. I mean, Cameron James, has been awesome. If there's any other kind of closing thoughts you have, things you're excited about, other things that you think brands should be thinking about, would love to hear them. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time.
And where to find you? Where can people learn more about the Diigitals?
So if you want to learn more about the Diigitals, just Google us. I think we have the best kind of resources. Our website, it has a massive kind of resource of like information about the brands that we've worked with and the kind of projects you can do, even if you're not thinking about necessarily working with us directly. But if you want to get inspired, there's a huge wealth of history there when it comes to the development of this space, and I find that really interesting. Or just kind of message us on Instagram. You can probably find Shudu. She's probably the more popular one than me, which is just Shudugram. But what I like to say to brands is just do it. You know, this is something that I always say, like, jump in, like, get involved. You're only going to learn by doing it.
Yeah.
You're not really going to learn much from the sidelines, you know, and who knows, you might make an impact in this space. You might change it for the better. You know, the brands that jumped in and worked with me right at the beginning, they are now considered, you know, the kind of predecessors for all of this, the kind of foundation for this, you know. So and they took kind of a risk, you know, and I still think there's that opportunity there. So yeah, I just think do it. And I think do it with kind of meaning as well. I see a lot of projects focusing really on the money aspect, and it's so transparent, but you know, I think move away from that and just do something experimental that isn't necessarily focused on kind of capitalizing on the metaverse. You know, there's so many more interesting things than money to do with the metaverse, you know. So yeah, that's my kind of closing advice. And thank you guys for having me. It's been so interesting speaking with you.
Yeah, thank
thank
you.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Metaverse Matters by Pebble Ventures. If you enjoyed the content, please do subscribe and rate the show. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn at pebbleventures.com or directly at mike@pebbleventures.com. If you're a brand exploring the space, or you're already testing and are looking to develop next-level strategies, please do reach out. We'd welcome an introductory conversation to learn more about your goals, where you are in the process, and share our thoughts about your business. Have a great day.